In the year 530 BCE, the most powerful man on earth met his match, not on a grand battlefield, but in the unforgiving steppes of Central Asia, at the hands of a woman whose name would echo through history as both liberator and executioner. What happened next would shock even the battle-hardened warriors of the ancient world, as Queen Tomyris of the Massagetæ delivered a punishment so brutal that it redefined the very concept of royal vengeance. This is not just the story of a military defeat, it's the terrifying account of how absolute power, when challenged, can unleash forces more savage than any torture device ever conceived. The Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great had become an unstoppable juggernaut, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Hindu Kush. For 30 years, Cyrus had conquered nation after nation with a combination of military genius and calculated mercy, a formula that had never failed him. His empire was the largest the world had ever seen, built on the bones of fallen kingdoms and the submission of countless peoples. Yet in 530 BCE, this seemingly invincible emperor turned his gaze toward the wild lands beyond the Jaxartes River, where the Massagetæ people roamed free under the iron rule of their warrior queen. The Massagetæ were not like the civilized kingdoms Cyrus had conquered before. These were nomadic warriors who lived by the sword, drank Mars blood mixed with milk, and worshipped the god of war above all others. Their society was built around constant warfare, cattle raiding, and the brutal law of survival that governed the endless steppes. Women fought alongside men, and leadership was earned through combat prowess rather than birthright. In this harsh world, Queen Tomyris had risen to power not through political maneuvering, but by proving herself the most ruthless and capable warrior among her people. When Cyrus first approached the Massagetæ lands, he employed his usual strategy of diplomacy backed by overwhelming force. Historical accounts by Herodotus reveal that Cyrus initially sought to marry Queen Tomyris, likely viewing this as an easy way to absorb her kingdom into his empire without bloodshed. But Tomyris saw through this transparent attempt at political subjugation immediately. Her response was swift and unambiguous: she would never submit to foreign rule, and any Persian who crossed into Massagetæ territory would find only death waiting for them. The rejection stung Cyrus's pride in ways that pure military resistance never could. Here was a barbarian queen, as he would have seen her, daring to refuse the great Cyrus, the conqueror of Babylon, liberator of the Jews, king of kings. The insult demanded not just conquest but total domination. Cyrus began planning what he intended to be his final campaign, one that would bring these wild steppes under Persian control, and add Queen Tomyris to his collection of defeated royalty. He had no way of knowing that he was walking into a trap more cunning. The initial Persian advance into Massagetæ territory proceeded exactly as Cyrus had planned. His engineers built a bridge across the Jaxartes River, a feat of engineering that demonstrated Persian technical superiority to the nomadic tribes. His scouts reported that the Massag were retreating deeper into their territory, apparently unwilling to face the might of the Persian army in open battle. To Cyrus, this confirmed what he had always believed, that barbarian courage crumbled when faced with civilized military power. He pressed forward with confidence, his army of veteran soldiers cutting deep into the steppes like a sword through flesh. But Queen Tomyris was not retreating in fear. She was drawing the Persians away from their supply lines and into terrain where her cavalry would have every advantage. The steppes that seemed empty and lifeless to Persian eyes were actually filled with hidden water holes, secret camps, and carefully planned ambush points that the Massagetæ had used for generations. Every mile the Persians' march took them further from safety and deeper into a killing ground that Tomyris had been preparing since the moment she received Cyrus's marriage proposal. The trap was sprung with devastating effectiveness. Tomyris had sent a portion of her forces to retreat visibly before the Persian advance, leading them toward what appeared to be the main Massagetæ camp. When the Persians attacked this seemingly vulnerable target, they found it defended by only a token force that fled after minimal resistance. The camp was filled with supplies, including large quantities of wine, a luxury that the Massagetæ rarely possessed. Cyrus's soldiers, believing they had won an easy victory, began celebrating their conquest with the captured wine, not knowing they were drinking their own doom. Among the celebrating Persians was Sparapaces, son of Queen Tomyris, who had been captured in the skirmish along with other high-ranking Massagetæ warriors. But this capture was no accident, it was part of Tomyris' larger strategy. She knew that taking her son prisoner would force her to respond with the full fury of maternal vengeance, providing the perfect justification for the brutal retaliation she was already planning. When news of her son's capture reached her, Tomyris sent a message to Cyrus that revealed both her strategic thinking and her intimate understanding of Persian weaknesses. The message, recorded by Herodotus, was a masterpiece of psychological warfare disguised as diplomacy. Tomyris offered to exchange 1/3 of her army for the return of her son, appealing to what she knew was Cyrus's sense of honor and his confidence in Persian military superiority. She suggested that Cyrus would surely prefer to face her forces in open battle rather than resort to capturing women and children. The message was crafted to make refusing seem cowardly, while accepting would give Tomyris exactly what she needed: a legitimate reason to destroy the Persian army completely. Cyrus, perhaps influenced by his long string of victories, made the fatal decision to reject this offer. Instead, he chose to use Sparapeses as a hostage to force Tomyris's submission, not understanding that he was dealing with a culture where death in battle was considered more honorable than life in bondage. When Sparapeses realized he had become a tool in his captor's political games, he chose the path that Massaget's honor demanded. According to historical accounts, he requested that his bonds be loosened temporarily, then used the opportunity to take his own life rather than serve as leverage against his mother and his people. The news of her son's death reached Queen Tomyris like a lightning bolt, transforming her from a calculating strategist into an instrument of pure vengeance. The historical record suggests that her grief was overwhelming, but it was immediately channeled into a fury that would make the steppes run red with Persian blood. She sent one final message to Cyrus, and the words that have survived show us the terrible resolve of a mother who had lost everything she held dear. This was no longer about territorial disputes or political independence, it had become personal in the most dangerous way possible. Her message to Cyrus was brief but terrifying in its implications: bloodthirsty Cyrus, do not be lifted up by this thing that has happened, that with that fruit of the vine whereof you Persians fill yourselves even to madness, so that as the wine goes down into your bodies, evil words rise up in you. Do not be lifted up by such a victory as this and destroy my son. Now I give you good advice: give me back my son, and get out of my country with no harm done. But if you will not do this, I swear by the sun, the Lord of the Masag, I will give you your fill of blood, though you be never so thirsty for it. The promise of blood was not metaphorical in Massaget's culture. Blood held sacred significance, and Tomyris was making a ritual vow that would bind her to a specific form of vengeance. She was not simply threatening to kill Cyrus in battle, she was promising something far more personal and horrifying. The phrase, give you your fill of blood, carried implications that would only become clear after the final confrontation. Cyrus, steeped in Persian concepts of honor and completely unfamiliar with Massaget's religious practices, likely interpreted this as typical barbarian bravado rather than the sacred oath it actually represented. With diplomacy finally exhausted and her son's death demanding retribution, Queen Tomyris began mobilizing the full military might of the Mage Confederation. This was not merely her own tribe, but a coalition of related nomadic peoples who recognized her authority and shared her commitment to driving the Persians from their lands. The force she assembled was unlike anything Cyrus had faced before, not a traditional army with supply lines and siege equipment, but a swarm of mounted warriors who could strike without warning and disappear into the vastness of the steppes. The Massagete military system was perfectly adapted to their environment and lifestyle. Every warrior was an expert horseman from childhood, capable of shooting arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. They used composite bows that could punch through Persian armor at ranges that made conventional tactics useless. Their horses were hardy steppe ponies that could survive on grass and travel vast distances without tiring, giving them mobility advantages that Persian cavalry, dependent on grain and regular rest, could never match. Most importantly, they were fighting for their homeland against foreign invaders, giving them a level of motivation that professional soldiers could rarely achieve. Queen Tomyris positioned her forces using intimate knowledge of local terrain that the Persians completely lacked. She chose a battlefield where Persian advantages in heavy infantry and siege equipment would be meaningless while maximizing the effectiveness of her mounted archers. Historical sources suggest the location was near a river crossing where Persian retreat would be difficult, but Massagete forces could withdraw in multiple directions if needed. Every aspect of her battle plan was designed to turn Persian strengths into weaknesses while amplifying her own tactical advantages. The battle itself was unlike the organized conflicts that had made Cyrus famous throughout the ancient world. There were no neat formations, no gradual escalation, no opportunity for negotiation or surrender. The Masajidi attack came like a force of nature, thousands of mounted warriors appearing from multiple directions simultaneously, filling the air with arrows before vanishing back into the steppes, only to reappear elsewhere and strike again. Persian heavy infantry, the backbone of Cyrus's previous victories, found themselves unable to close with an enemy that refused to stand and fight in conventional terms. Cyrus himself was reportedly killed in the thick of fighting, though the exact circumstances remain disputed among ancient historians. Some accounts suggest he fell to an arrow while trying to rally his troops, others that he was overwhelmed during a desperate cavalry charge. What is certain is that his death marked the complete collapse of Persian resistance. Without their legendary commander, the invading army disintegrated into isolated groups of survivors trying desperately to reach safety. Most would never see Persia again, their bones left to bleach under the endless sky of the steppes they had tried to conquer. But for Queen Tomyris, Cyrus's death in battle was not sufficient vengeance for her son's fate. According to Herodotus and other ancient sources, she ordered her warriors to locate the emperor's body among the Persian dead, a task that would have required searching through thousands of corpses scattered across the battlefield. When the body was finally found and brought before her, she was faced with the physical remains of the man who had been called the greatest conqueror in human history. What happened next would become one of the most shocking acts of posthumous revenge in recorded history. The queen ordered that a wineskin be filled with human blood, specifically Persian blood from the fallen soldiers who had followed their emperor into the steppes. This was not random cruelty, but a carefully planned ritual that tied directly to her earlier promise to give Cyrus his fill of blood. In Masagidian religious tradition, blood was the essence of life force, and consuming it was believed to transfer power from the dead to the living. By forcing Cyrus to receive his fill of blood in death, Tomyris was not just delivering vengeance, but performing a sacred ritual that would bind his spirit and prevent it from finding rest. When the grisly preparation was complete, Queen Tomyris personally took Cyrus's severed head and thrust it into the blood-filled wineskin. According to the historical account, she then spoke directly to the dead emperor, "I am alive, and I have conquered you in battle, and yet you have destroyed me by taking my son with treachery. But I will fulfill my threat and give you your fill of blood." This act was not performed in the heat of battle rage, but as a cold, calculated ritual that demonstrated the depth of her commitment to vengeance and the alien nature of Masagidian justice to Persian sensibilities. The symbolism of this act would have been immediately clear to any Masagidian witnessing it, but utterly horrifying to civilized observers from the Persian Empire or the Greek world. By drowning Cyrus's head in blood, Tomyris was ensuring that his spirit would be trapped forever in a cycle of thirst and consumption, unable to find peace in the afterlife. This was not simply about humiliating a defeated enemy, it was about inflicting eternal punishment on someone who had violated the most sacred bonds of motherhood and honor. The very excess of the revenge served to communicate the magnitude of Cyrus's offense in Masagidian terms. Word of Cyrus's death and the manner of his treatment spread rapidly throughout the ancient world, carried by the few Persian survivors who managed to escape the steppes, and by traders who witnessed the aftermath. The story took on mythical proportions as it was retold, with some versions emphasizing the martial prowess of Queen Tomyris while others focused on the gruesome fate of the great emperor. Greek historians like Herodotus preserve the account not just as historical record, but as a moral lesson about the dangers of hubris and the terrible price of underestimating one's enemies. The immediate consequences of the Persian defeat were catastrophic for the empire Cyrus had built, the loss of their founder and a significant portion of their militia. Strength created a succession crisis that threatened to tear the empire apart. Cyrus's son, Cambyses, eventually secured the throne, but the Persian expansion that had seemed unstoppable was permanently halted on the northern frontier. No subsequent Persian ruler would dare to challenge the Masag again, and the steppes remained free from imperial control for centuries to come. For the Mage Confederation, victory over the Persian Empire established Queen Tomyris as one of the most feared rulers in the ancient world. Her successful defense of nomadic independence inspired other steppe peoples to resist foreign conquest, creating a pattern of resistance that would persist for over 1,000 years. The tactical innovation she employed against the Persians, using mobility and terrain to neutralize conventional military advantages, became standard practice for nomadic warriors facing settled empires. Her legacy lived on in the military traditions of peoples from the Scythians to the Mongols. The psychological impact of Ptolemy's victory extended far beyond military considerations. She had demonstrated that the mightiest empire in the world could be defeated by people considered barbarians, and that conventional notions of civilization and savagery were more complex than imperial propagandists claimed. The image of the great Cyrus's head submerged in blood became a powerful symbol of the limitations of imperial power and the terrible consequences of underestimating one's opponents, particularly when family honor and cultural survival were at stake. Modern historians continue to debate the exact details of these events, as ancient sources sometimes contradict each other and archaeological evidence from the steppes is limited. However, the core narrative of a nomadic queen who used superior tactics and intimate knowledge of local conditions to defeat a vastly larger imperial army is supported by multiple independent sources. The story has resonated through history precisely because it challenges conventional assumptions about power, gender, and the nature of civilization itself. The methods Queen Ptolemy used to defeat Cyrus reveal a sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare, strategic deception, and the exploitation of cultural differences. Her use of her son's capture as a catalyst for total war, her manipulation of Persian confidence and honor codes, and her choice of battlefield all demonstrate military thinking that was far more complex than her enemies realized. The brutality of her final revenge was not mindless savagery, but a carefully calculated act designed to send a message that would prevent future invasions. Perhaps most significantly, the story of Queen Ptolemy forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice and proportional response. From a Persian perspective, Cyrus was engaged in standard imperial expansion, using methods that had proven successful throughout his career. From Ptolemy's viewpoint, he was an invader who had killed her son and threatened her people's existence. The collision between these worldviews produced violence that shocked even the battle-hardened ancient world, reminding us that the most terrible conflicts often arise not from pure evil but from irreconcilable differences in values and perspective. In the end, Queen Tamyris achieved something that no other opponent of Cyrus the Great had managed. She didn't just defeat him, she erased him. The Persian Empire survived his death and continued to expand in other directions, but the northern frontier remained forever closed to imperial ambition. The steppes that had swallowed Cyrus and his army remained free, defended by the memory of a queen who proved that even the greatest conqueror in history could be broken by someone more ruthless than he ever imagined. Her legacy stands as a testament to the terrible power of maternal vengeance and the price that empires pay when they mistake cultural difference for weakness.